if both offensively and defensively. Crucially, it can answer like Kazaka's golems, which is one of the few ways that Rogue can really be aggressive enough to win the game against Warrior, where they just get that like duplicate golem coming down as a 5-drop, and that can just get cleaned up very nicely by the Tent Trashers on the other side. Whereas I think Ogre-Mancers are more cards that you play in your deck for the likes of Demon Hunter and Mage, I would imagine. You could argue Priest as well, but Priest is generally being banned, so it's not a big consideration. And honestly, Tent Trasher is a card that's gone up in my estimation a lot, and it's interesting to see the step-by-step evolution of this deck, where I think originally it was quite greedy, then No Hands got his hands on it, and I
don't believe you.
Makes sense. He does technically have hands. I think that's an important distinction that needs to be made here. But yeah, No Hands got his hands on it and made it, in my opinion, too slimmed down. Like, he was lacking a little bit of value in the build that he had overall. But then some elements of that were reserved with like the Imprisoned Gnarg that you see being played out early here for RDU, right? And then that's caused the kind of menagerie style of the deck to come together, right? Where because Gnarg is a demon, and because there's mechs in the deck already, because there's a Murloc in the deck already, suddenly things like Tent Trasher start to make a lot of sense. And then even N'Zoth is something that I've seen a little bit on ladder now here and there as people start to get a little bit greedier with it again.
And here, as we look at where the game sits right now, both players kind of doing their powerful things.
Yeah.
How do you like condition in this turn? Is that just too wild?
What does it achieve would be my question, because it doesn't...
It just gets used. That's what it achieves.
Sure. Okay, I can see that. I think if it like solved a problem for me, like, you know, I then have a 4-attack rush minion in my hand, so I can deal with the Octobot if there's no self-proc, then maybe we could have gone for it. But honestly, I like this play that RDU went for here, which is just contesting it with the Playmaker. Actually not the easiest thing in the world for Rogue to answer this early in the game. I think we've talked about this before, where, you know, because Wicked Stab only does 2 this early in the game, and they're very light on removal, there's no backstab anymore, it's really just comboed Brain Freeze that answers this situation. So if no such answer is found, RDU not only gets to trade over the Octobot with a 4-3, but he also gets to potentially get huge value out of the Playmaker effect.
Yeah. It was definitely worth a try, but now Brain Freeze being active means that he can go for it. And there was also an element there where Bozzzton could have still played Prize Plunderer just to have an extra minion on board, but chose not to.
Yeah, I think you could. I agree. You could like Prize Plunderer the 4-3 first, because I don't think you would proc your option there, right?
Yeah, yeah. You'd Prize Plunderer the 4-3 first, then Brain Freeze. Yeah.
Yes, because I think Bozzzton very interested in defending this Octobot for his original hand, especially now that there's this nice juicy 2-2 that he can just trade it into, and he has that double field contact hand, which benefits much more from this discount than his secret passage hand would have done.
And now, in response to this, I think because RDU's seen the dig for the answer to the Playmaker, yeah, I like this a lot. Get Rukara down now, because it is a similar threat level, right, as the Playmaker is. So just get it down and say, well, now you're going to have to go digging again. If you didn't have it last turn, you've probably not got it this turn.
I'm just checking, Raven, and this Rukara has escalated to threat level midnight, in fact. Yes.
Yeah, I'm right there with you on that one.
It's quiet. I even heard it in your voice, the resignation of like, oh, there's an Office reference coming now.
Hey, I like it. I like it. It's just I knew exactly as soon as I said it, I was like, yep, I can probably tell you the exact line Sal's going to say next.
Yep. Prison Gnarg, of course, dead ringer for Michael Scarn.
Here, though, Bozzzton just doesn't have it, right? Like using the Playmaker for the kind of win-win scenario has paid off for RDU.
Too soon.
Deficient is sufficient.
Yeah, still just a turn away from being able to do anything relevant with those Wicked Stabs means that RDU just gets to cash out with the Rukara value now, particularly with this Warmaul Challenger in hand. The perfect combination.
It's kind of strange, isn't it? Like where he goes with this, because he could like Warmaul that for the extra damage, but it does mean then his Rukara is a little bit susceptible to the board. I guess you could just
trade down with minion and weapon. You just make this trade because it just gets the biggest, right? Like basically every attack that you put into it is free, and you also gain +1 attack. Like it's insane sending it into a 1 attack minion.
Has reduced down a Bozzzton's hand quite significantly though, and that hand still contains a field contact #2.
Quiet.
Yes.
Too quiet.
But Bozzzton's have to go do something pretty good, right?
Yeah, that had to be like devolving missiles, honestly, at that point, because just obviously Brain Freeze solves a small problem here, and that he'll probably be able to clear up the Rakara with it. But what are you doing about the 410 on the other side of the board? Like, are you going to have to start committing these Wicked Stabs instead?
Now there is Brain Freeze and Prize Plunderer, and then you would imagine next turn that the 410's probably making a trade, right?
True.
Or I guess the turn after.
So yeah, I guess this now ends with the Plunderer on the Rakara.
I like I need to ban you from saying the word true.
True!
And that's why.
Do you want to give a minion spell damage +1 this turn, Raven?
I was looking for it there. No, I want to give it Divine Shield.
Yeah, okay.
A big turn for Bozzzton, honestly, drawing a ton of cards, and this 4/7 has been at least put on hold for now.
Yep.
Not you.
And this is a bad look for RDU. This is now situations reversed, right? Up until now, it was key banner minions landing on the board for RDU and not being able to be answered by Bozzzton. And now, inexplicably, in his rush deck, RDU had 0 minions that could rush into that board and even clean it up. But even with the way that Bozzzton did it, RDU was going to need multiple minions to come out there.
Oh, interesting. Okay, going for the Mankrik. I was wondering what kind of Kazakus you could get here. If you can get some kind of Poison Rush, Poison Deal Damage or something, just because of both minions are such high health.
Yeah, it was the first thing I looked at as well, is if you get Kazakus into Poison Deal Damage, you're almost certain to then find a Shadow Step after that as well, and you can just absolutely blast through your deck while wiping out this board. But I think there's a lot of value there to getting the Mankrik in as well. Bozzzton will now want to get something off the board before he continues to draw cards, because he needs the board space for the wife to be drawn and for the enraged Mankrik to be summoned.
He also kind of needs the hand space.
True.
Don't you dare.
Can't just ruin a perfectly good word, Raven. I have to be able to say true. Not my fault Derek's really funny when he says
it's the way you say it, Saul. Okay, here's a rush minion though, and there's a playmaker and a parade leader. I am now just naming cards in hand for RDU. But he's going to have to pull something out the bag even with this kind of half combo he's got going on here. 2/2/2 sounds okay to me.
Yeah, just has to fight for board as best he can now. The good news for RDU, if you break this game down, is that all of the discounts have been used up for Bozzzton, and they have landed on non-Alexstrasza Tenwu cards, which means that the burst damage is kind of limited. But it's where that second Shadow Step might come into play when I was talking about, using it very aggressively with the Kazakus and a cheap Golem. Bozzzton has held on to it here for the potential of extra damage. And RDU actually said, you know what? I literally could not care less about your field contact anymore. You have 6 cards left on in your deck, and it's turn 7. Like, go ahead and draw more if you really want to.
And I like it because it's almost a certainty that Bozzzton's going to trade this field contact anyway. So get rid of the minion that you're more scared of being shadow stepped, right? Such as that where One Thief.
Talked a lot about all the good matchups for Cult Neophyte in the deck for Rogue. This is obviously one of the ones where it's a pretty big whiff. But even then, it's a Bloodfen Raptor that can draw you a card off field contact. It's not a huge downside to be carrying this in your deck in situations like this.
I think they should add that, actually. Bloodfen Raptor, Battlecry, draw a card.
I heard there's some design jobs going if you wanted to apply, Raven. Sounds like you got some great ideas up your sleeves.
They're for Battlegrounds.
Ah, okay.
No one appreciates my ideas for Battlegrounds. Well, there's Mankrik coming down for some extra pressure. And just one more minion for RDU to try and deal with.
Yeah, and there's really not much of an answer to this. There's really Blademaster Samuro is the go-to minion, but it would be unbuffed in hand right now if it came out, which means that there is no response. And RDU, after getting the good matchup and the good queue for Bozzzton, Bozzzton, I think, manages to vanquish some demons there by putting in a very solid performance, I would say, with the Rogue overall, winning an unfavorable matchup and now getting himself in a position where, after all the highs and lows of the day so far, he could now be looking to end the day as our weekly champion and be completely locked up for those playoffs as we get to the end of the season.
Yeah, this is a big deal, isn't it? Because if you just look at how the series can play out now, Bozzzton, of course, still has his Rogue. But he's either going to face a mirror match or a mage, which I think being 1-0 up in the series, you're more than okay doing if you're the player on that Rogue, right? Because your mirror match, of course, 50-50 if you want to just simplify everything down. And I also think it's just not a terrible matchup against mage either. So it does look like, yeah, RDU agrees, and he is going to go to at least start on the mirror match here first instead.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense to me, but obviously this whole series could have been very, very different because Bozzzton needed those discounts quite desperately, and I think RDU did the smart thing in responding to the Octobot, and Bozzzton had to go fishing to look for answers, brain freeze, and did find them. But don't forget, rewind back an hour or so to when RDU was in a very similar position, and he just went digging through his deck with a Incanter's Flow cram session in a position where he potentially had no answer and found that very same brain freeze to dig himself out of trouble. So, you know, brain freeze giveth, brain freeze taketh away, Raven, for RDU so far today. But as you mentioned, he is going to have to step up into this mirror match now with the Miracle Rogue, and I think probably fair to say this is where the last Bozzzton series truly started to go off the rails when we hit the Rogue mirror. So this will be the next big test to see if Bozzzton can maintain his composure through this one.
It will, yeah. And this mirror, I think at least extremely difficult to play because there are so many different routes to victory. What are the main things the players are looking to do? Is it all just about drawing cards, or is there any idea for kind of hard focusing tempo instead?
I mean, I have to say it depends, because it does. It really does depend on
there's a right answer, Sol.
What you're given through the early game. Like, ideally, you'd like to just draw Octobot into Kazakus and Jandis in your opening hand, right? And then the game just kind of ends, because you just do way too much stuff with stats in the early game for your opponent to compete with. That's plan A. However, that happens quite rarely. That's an extreme low percentage of draws. So outside of that, like, the game actually occurs, right? And both players get to think about drawing cards and so on and back and forth. Then it's that balance between what resources do I have to spend to not die to my opponent's board versus how greedy can I be with additional resources to be threatening burst damage to my opponent. That's where cards like One Thief can really come in super clutch, because they can not only pick up fireballs and masks to really add to your own bird plan, they can also pick up flurries, cone of colds, flame strikes, all that kind of stuff to be able to answer boards that you normally would not be able to. However, going all the way back around to step number 1, Raven, I did mention something about the Octobot into Kazakus curve and how powerful it can end up being.
That is true, but I guess the key from it is, and as expected from Rogue matchups, is to just be able to stay flexible, right?
Yes.
And just respond or put on pressure and still have a backup plan at all times, which is very typical of just the Rogue class in general. Yeah, Octo going to come down here for RDU. I'm going to hit some pretty key minions and cards in general, right? Like, yes, Kazakus, obviously good. Just reduce it down. It can be played next turn and then set up for. But 0 mana Brain Freeze, 1 mana Tenwu, 1 mana Swindle. Like, I'll take all of those, thank you.
You could do some really dumb stuff this turn if you wanted to.
What, to get the Plunderer?
How dumb it is. Yeah, to get the Plunderer up to 4 and deny the Octobot discount. It's not pretty, but it can be done.
Is it like Foxy Step, Foxy something Plunderer?
But you go Foxy and then plunder your Foxy, so your Foxy lives at a 3-1.
Oh, you can do it like that, sure.
And then you can play the other stuff from there, but even then the Guardian Orc Merchant then doesn't give anything Divine Shield because it would kill whatever it attacks. Yeah, it's just all too ugly. It's the specific combination of cards. I've definitely had this kind of hand where I have Prize Plunderer and Shadow Step in the early game against an Octobot, and have definitely done it and felt it was right even after the fact because it's so important. But it's just the specific cards that Bozzzton has in his own hand. It's just so ugly because, you know, you can't really play Guardian Org Merchant without shooting your opponent's Octobot, for example, which obviously you don't want to do. It's just the actual battle cries of the minions just don't really line up very well. Again!
Right, check for Moargs.
Alright, so you swindle, you can drop the Octobot, you can brain freeze it, you can Vanessa Van Cleef to get the Mancrick from your opponent, discount that as well. Still have a Tenwu in hand for 0 mana if you really wanted to pick up another Mancrick as well from your opponent.
What if he Tenwu's the Octo?
He's not Tenwuing anything anymore. I guess he could do, because he still has the Brain Freeze left to self-activate this, right, if he really wants to.
Just gonna leave it up.
Leave it there. Okay.
Yep.
Is all of this better than just play Kazakus? I'm not 100% convinced it was, you know.
Yes, it looked cooler.
It did look a lot cooler, yeah, I'll give you that.
And I guess that's it. This sort of leads on to my point from earlier that playing Kazakus out on 3 is fine and not bad, but you still can't do the golem till 5, right?
That's very fair, yeah.
So at least now he's done a lot of the messing about. He's got the Octo back down again.
It's not 100% true, is it? Because he could have still just played Kazakus and Shadow Step the Octobot, and then had 0 mana Octobot, 0 mana Brain Freeze, plus a 5 mana Golem in his hand, and just done all of that on turn 4.
True. You'd have a much smaller board.
He would, yeah.
Is the, I guess, the difference there, right?
Yep. Yeah, not denying that the play RDU made is good, just wondering if there's something better hidden around anywhere. And if I know one thing, it's Kazakus is a good card in Rogue Mirrors.
And a terrible card in Paladin.
Yes, also that. I still can't get over it. People just rocked up to GM with Kazakus in their Paladin.
I'm looking for a few good mercenaries.
Drop it down now.
Even play Hearthstone.
Rush Breeze 2? Is that where do you think he landed here? 'Cause this was not the best golem I've ever seen.
It wasn't, no. There's an argument that +2/+2 wouldn't be the worst, but, you know, Bozzzton did a very good job of making a sticky, annoying board on the other side. Like, I think RDU, with all his discounts, would have felt like he would be ahead, but because Bozzzton went for that huge Shadow Step turn with the Prize Plunderer instead, he's obviously finding himself slightly behind. So I expect he might go freeze, but I'm still tempted to pick +2/+2, honestly. And actually, yeah, that is what he's gone with. He's gone with Rush +2/+2.
Bozzzton could just go straight Secret Passage here for something to actually do this turn. He does have the double trade on board to keep it nice and empty. He knows he is likely to be facing down the Golem next turn. Probably doesn't know how kind of bad it is, and that it's actually likely that we know it won't be happening next turn if he makes the trades. I still think Secret Passage just has to be enough here.
Friend.
Bozzzton disagrees, just going to fight for board as aggressively as he can this turn. Which I don't mind. When he's so far behind on value and so far behind on mana chi, I think just being ahead and landing chip damage is actually a good way of looking at it, right, as to how you're going to recover. Kind of respect this.
And he will not get away with it, but It will pay off for him as well because there isn't like the ultimate golem on the other side, right? From RDU, it's pretty bad for this scenario. Needs this to be decent though. Oh. Got to be Kazakus, right? However much field contact in Neophyte looks tempting, I think he just has to pick Kazakus and just have the golem for next turn.
What if you just live the max tempo dream and just take the 1 mana golem here?
I wouldn't hate it.
Because +1/+1 is fine, right? That gives you a really juicy value trade with the Divine Shield minion that you already have. And then if you get the nuts, like poison deal damage, you just get to push 5 more straight up this turn and just build a really aggressive board.
Yeah, I wouldn't hate it.
Kind of like that, honestly.
So many options. Choose soon.
I will say I think the other options are too slow. Bozzzton looks like he wants the card draw. Okay.
It's the other way of looking at it, right? Is just to say, well, you know, my hand is very low on value, so I will play the, you know, high value thing that draws me cards and potentially gets me back into the game that way. But I was personally very focused on just saying, just playing the aggressor at this point, right? Like, just pretend you're a different deck. Just say you're face rogue, right? And just deal damage, be aggressive, be low on cards. Just try and draw your way out of it.
There was even a chance that, like, Kazakus would have got drawn cards if you wanted it as well, right? So
yeah, that's true.
It's just, I don't know, because now there's just no Kazakus because it's back in the deck. And if you want high value stuff to do, well, that's one of them.
Awkward turn for RDU. For sure. And I guess this is another upside of the way the Bozzzton's played, is that he's put a target minion in play, right? So if RDU wanted to, for example, just jam Jandis, that's much more scary to do because there's a field contact up on the other side of the board, and that would kind of be conceding that one huge advantage that RDU has with the Battlecry minions all drawing cards from that point. So it's definitely a good distraction. It's a good disruption play from Bozzzton, the way he did it.
What if RDU just plays his golem? Forget about the 2/2. Or he could actually play his Tenwu first, right, and then golem.
Sure.
Kill the 3/2, because right now,
I like that.
Your opponent's got 2 cards. Like, stop him drawing cards. That's how you win.
Come, friend.
Yeah, I agree. Obviously, you're super tempted to get greedy with the Tenwu.
Yeah.
Jandis and even Mankrik in your hands, but yeah, I like it. Just get a 5/4 in play. And I think you see Bozzzton's reaction to that is that... Oh! Bozzzton's initial reaction to that is that he tried to go for a bit of a gimmick there and, you know, didn't get away with it. But now, having picked up field contact number 2, he is right back in this game.
Just the best single draw in his deck at that point.
Org Merchant your own?
Yeah, I want the value trade.
Right. So this bare minimum means you can just go 3/1 and Divine Shield into 5/4 and then Prize Plunderer the 5/2, right? Yeah, exactly this. Oh! Ho, ho, ho!
Oh, and he's got Swindle.
Look, Raven, if there's one thing I know, it's when you're having a bad day, when things aren't quite going right, not right for you, you should just rely on your wife. And that's exactly what Bozzzton's done here to beautiful effect. Now he's in such a good position that he's even thinking about what going face for 6 looks like over trading with the minion.
But again, I think that it's clear RDU does not have a great way to clear off this 3/2, or he would have done it the previous turn on the original one, right? So just defend it. Yeah, make this good turn, maybe even better next turn. And the problem is that not a bad Jandis in any way, but it's at this moment in time, it's just the limited amount of attacks is the main problem for Jandis now. Not whether, oh, well, Moonfang's really hard to kill. It's like, yeah, Bozzzton will just ignore it then, you know.
Yeah, I think Bozzzton can very much just let that 6/3 be a 6/3 this turn, or if he wants to, just brain freeze it, so at least it isn't going to be attacking on future turns.
Yeah, even like... Wait, can he go 5?
What makes something...
A lot of options that turn, actually.
Hello?
Is it me you're looking for? Bozzzton's just a god. Now Brain Freeze step to Jandis?
Choose soon.
Or on it.
Jandis?
What if you Tenwu the Jandis, draw an additional card, and just have Jandis Shadow Step next turn? You don't get to Brain Freeze, but...
Yeah. You also lose, again, a lot of mana cheat. I feel like we keep having this conversation. I don't know whether you're genuinely suggesting this or you've forgotten about the one-turn thing with Tenwu. Because sometimes, like, it's fine, and, like, I'm with you, but...
Well, no. I've definitely not forgotten about it. I know exactly the loss of mana. My main point was if you look at his hand,
yeah,
there wasn't necessarily that much mana to spend anyway outside of the top, draw off the top.
Yeah. But the thing is, like, on the following turn, you only have 9 mana, right? So if you have to play Jandis for 6, it's not like you can go Jandis step Jandis
Sure.
which is kind of sketchy. I think obviously
That's fair.
If Jandis costs 5, then sure, I'd be interested. Or if you had 10 mana, maybe I'd be interested. But I think if Jandis still costs 5, we'd be playing a very different game of Hearthstone right now.
Yes. The not game of Hearthstone, because it would be over.
Yeah. Not just this game. Like, Hearthstone would be cancelled if Jandis...
It would have just ended.
Yeah.
We would have not stood for this. At least RDU now has got his field contact live and is also now drawing a lot of cards. Both players fairly even, actually, on that total card draw, 8 and 7 cards.
Yep. Neither player really too close in terms of putting together combo damage. Yeah, to end the game.
Why are field contacts allowed to live, Subtle? I mean, I guess at this point there's not many more cards left to draw, but this has been ridiculous.
It has been, yeah. RDU just really hasn't had the option this game. There was the previous game. I think it was a very deliberate decision, right, where he chose to take damage off the board as opposed to, you know, trying to stick a band-aid on the gaping wound that was the amount of cards that Bozzzton was drawing. But this time he could really only have the option to kill 1 minion, and he was just kind of dead if he left Aegwin alive, right, with a 5/5 on board with +2 spell damage. So had to choose to take that one out instead. Those one thieves coming into play. Oh, the Vanessa picked up, which I believe is a prize plunderer. Yep.
Too soon.
Give me that.
Finally, one died.
Someone killed one. Shadow step it back, take care of the 3/7, push the damage face.
Yeah, shooting stars doesn't look so bad either.
Ticking over to 10 mana next turn for Bozzzton, which means he has the Wicked Stabs pumping up to 6.
Yeah,
Good chance he's just threatening lethal now.
Yeah, and even if not, depending on how big RDU's board is by the end of this turn, just Mask of Cthulhu could just work wonders versus Rogue, right?
That's right.
Even if there's just like one clunky turn, say if this Neophyte comes down, makes the combo not that good, you could just play Mask and kind of be okay with it. Especially because he has that shooting star in hand as well to just sort of thin down the health on board.
Yeah, he is very much spell mage role-playing right now. With his hand, he can just use shooting star to carve some health off the board. That pushes more damage face with the mask. And then he's finishing it up with his fireball over the top. But his fireball costs 2. He's already played 2 Incanter's Flows on his deck, Raven.
Hungry soon.
I think RDU quite rightly identifying that there was no way he's going to survive this onslaught if he allows the discounts to go off, because then just suddenly Alex draws a Wicked Stab is just all possible in the same turn. After saying a definitive no to that Kazakus earlier in the game, Kazakus said, well, fine, I will take my ball and go all the way to the bottom of the deck.
I'll take my ball of clay and take it right to the bottom of the deck.
So many options.
Now, it's tempting to just and he can activate his Octo, right? What if he does that?
I'm looking
You can Kazakus first and then readjust. Like if you whiff on the 5-mana golem here, with like, you know, rush copy, rush deal damage, all that kind of stuff, then you can divert to something else instead.
Yeah, it's only because he would just have lethal next turn, right?
Oh, he took 1. I was not expecting him to take 1.
I mean, that kills a minion, right? 1 mana kill an enemy minion. Fine.
Yes.
But you can...
Muzzle their magic.
Okay.
Just has to push 2 here and then clean up the board.
Before I'm being stupid, can you not aim shooting star at your own minion? You can, right?
Yeah.
Okay, okay. So he could have actually activated his Octa, right? And then had the Alex and Tenwu cheap enough?
Yep.
Okay, good, good. I was making sure I just wasn't being stupid like I am, you know, once in a while. To be fair, though, there's Alex now still anyway. There's Mask of Cthulhu available to him. There's still a lot of strong ways Bozzzton can end this game.
Yep. I like this, honestly. The 1-mana choice here, now that I look at it more, is actually very smart because it just allowed him to toss that Wicked Stab face, which obviously it's achieving the same thing, right? When you were talking about discounting Octobot, you just wanted to not Wicked Stab that turn and just have it all in the same turn on the following.
Sure.
The other solution to that is just, hey, just play it this turn and just do the rest that you can.
Yeah, and it helped the 1 cost did something, right, as well, whether it would have been Poison Rush, Poison deal damage, deal, you know, whatever. It very often achieves something in that kind of looking board, and there's the concede from RDU, which means Bozzzton's 2-0 up so far with his Rogue, and that is a good spot to be in, as now RDU is going to have to fall back onto that Mage. And again, just a very, very winnable matchup here for Bozzzton, and if there's ever a way to recover from that semi-final from earlier today, it's to 3-0 sweep the final and say, nah, I don't care if people laugh or whatever about that match. I got 5 points this week. No one else did. Unlucky. So, Bozzzton, I mean, yeah, right? Like, that's all you care about. So Bozzzton's getting awfully close. And now, not only does he have his Rogue, worst case scenario, he has choice of Demon Hunter or just a Mage Mirror. So with so many chances and a good matchup to start, things are looking awfully good for Bozzzton.
Yeah, and I think credit where it's due. I think Bozzzton actually played that game pretty well. I think he played that game better than I would have played that game, you know, which if I'm going to heap the criticism on earlier, I think it's only fair to shout that out as well. You know, like I potentially could have been in a spot where I lost that game, because even though it looked quite one-sided at times, there were times it looked quite one-sided from RDU's side of the board.
I mean, Bozzzton had 2 cards in hand and a dream, didn't he? Like
Exactly. And so remember, you know, we were both pushing for that Kazakus choice at the time, but he chose Field Contact, drew 1 extra card, and that pushed him further in his deck to the point where he was able to then pick up Field Contact number 2. And that really opened up the game from that point. And then the Kazakus being still very powerful in that late game situation to clutch out the game. I think there was a couple of other spots where, you know, I was suggesting plays and Bozzzton found better ways to approach doing it. So, you know, when I was saying Bozzzton had a big opportunity to really, you know, vanquish some demons and actually get back on the horse in this series, I think he's absolutely done that. I think he's playing very well, and credit to him for doing that.
It's looking good so far, and I think depending on how this game finishes up, of course, I do think this final week of Last Hero Standing has really showed not only how cool the format is and how it can lead to a lot of variety in lineup building, but also how savage it is as well, Sol, because we've cast now a lot of matches where the game 1 matters so much in how or what the likelihood of the rest of the series playing out looks like, whereas it's simply just not as often the case in Conquest.
Right.
Here, though, it is, of course, going to be this Mage from RDU. We've seen it already today, and we're going to see it again. But again, just with those neophytes, which I think is just the inclusion in Rogue right now that has made the biggest impact, it could just still be a problem for RDU, and if Bozzzton can just stay ahead and pile on the pressure, it's going to look pretty good for him here.
It absolutely is, but we have seen what RDU can do at the helm of a Mage, right? When we've seen it time and time again, and once again, RDU has sat one of the power cards in his opening hand, and it's the new addition to the deck in Deck of Lunacy, but it's the card that he has relied upon in his 3-0 sweep in the previous series, and you can see the smirk starting to form on RDU's face already as he thinks, well, maybe I should have just done this to begin with.
Yeah, it's just funny. It's oh, you know, we see what RDU can do when he's at the helm of Mage. It's I think Mage is at the helm of RDU. At this point, is probably more accurate, as it's more just yes, Mage, take control. I'll try and hang on. Here though, on Bozzzton's side, not a terrible opening either. Early Cult Neo fight just for some disruption, but just leading straight into Mankrik is the kind of sort of early beef you want, right? Is he going to coin?
He does not coin, no. Yeah, I mentioned this earlier. The coin line plays around Cult Neophyte specifically. And now with Bozzzton, I'm almost certain playing Cult Neophyte on curve here. I'm almost certain playing Cult Neophyte on curve here.
Here's my question, Sol.
Yeah.
Cult Neophyte on curve, and then Radu does whatever. If there's an opportunity to Van Cleef a flow, do you take it?
I don't think so, no. I think there's actually not that many spells in the deck when you look at it. It's we kind of talk about this situationally a lot, where like we've talked about how like Ogremancer doesn't really interrupt the deck that much. How like Cult Neophyte doesn't really do much in like field contact turns because it's all minions. And even outside of that, like when you even look at the low number of spells that you have, 2 of them are Shadow Step as well, which, you know, nothing happens to when you play Incanter's Flow. So I think in general it's just a pretty low value card overall for the Rogue.
Okay. Mankrik is an option here for Bozzzton, but it does mean this lab partner gets a lot of work done, because I imagine Bozzzton also won't want to leave it up due to combustion, potentially as a response to Mankrik being played. So it's either that, or like this, he takes it just a little bit slower, pushes extra damage and defends his minion.
They're just really valuing pushing 3 this turn, which is kind of an interesting way to look at it, honestly. Because now he's saying if RDU wants to play Incanter's Flow, then the 3-1 gets to push again, right? He gets the coin out this way, which is pretty interesting. It also means if RDU had wanted to coin Lunacy that turn instead, which, you know, might be the read on the card in the far left of the hand for Bozzzton, as it is in reality, then that means then again the 3-1 would get to push 3 more damage. So I do like the aggressive stance that he set out here.
Ooh, well that might change some plans. Oh, insane. Oh, Vanessa could be useful here.
Could it though?
Well, to get the answer for next turn, if he wants to do it, if he just wants to like brain freeze Vanessa.
Is that even really an answer though? Just spend 5 mana dealing 5 damage to their minion? Like, you're so far behind if you do that, right?
I feel like he's going to be super far behind anyway, though.
Yeah, that might be fair.
Because at least then you don't have to use, what, like, brain freeze, stab plunderer or something to try and kill this, or whatever he'd have to do. Like, that seems worse than using one kind of free card.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's a play you enjoy making, Sottle, but it might just be a play you have to.
Yeah. But if you're really trying to get creative, is there any other way you can go about this? Like, maybe play the Vanessa this turn, but just not plan to use the Apexis Blast on the following turn, and just instead try and get the Apexis Blast in your hand, and just say that's 5 more damage that can go face with this Wicked Stab that I had this turn? Like, I don't know. I think whatever, like you were saying, whatever Bozzzton does there, he's just in massive amounts of trouble. Himself another brain freeze now with the Vanessa Van Cleef. Not entirely sure if efficient is sufficient this turn.
Yeah, it's not good, is it? I think this is one of those turns where you just hero power and say again and hope for field contact or something next turn. So it only takes 1 field contact, right?
Yep.
No one crosses the uncrowned.
Or you give yourself the option. Oh no, it was brain freeze, sorry, yeah.
Brain freeze, yeah.
For a second I thought it was Lunacy and I was like, oh, Sol, it's going to be one of those games.
Which makes this play kind of smart, right? Because not only is this stats in play onto 6 mana turn, which there's a very tiny chance your opponent has discounted Mask of Cthulhu in hand, right? There was like one card drawn from the actual deck discounted before it was Lunaseed. But at the same time, you have the same amount of Battlecry / combos in hand because you play one with the Vanessa and you replace it with the Brain Freeze. So
yeah,
even if you top deck the Field Contact, it's the same number of card draws.
Combustion was last card, so again, Vanessa not really going to be achieving too much if it gets bounced. RDU's nearly just at the point where you could just play a Troublemaker.
Wow, RDU and Malevolent Strike. Name a more iconic duo.
RDU and Incanter's Flow.
Great point.
RDU and any card he needs.
Yes. RDU and the nuts.
RDU and a nut. Actually quite like just Outrider's Axe, honestly. Just keep the card draw cooking.
Clearly having some discovering difficulties here, but RDU picked up the Oasis Ally and Ice Barrier in the end.
Nice.
Is a pretty weird combination, but I think because he's generating minions almost certainly next turn, like weirdly enough, Troublemaker is so powerful that even with all the nonsense that can come out from a deck of Lunacy, probably just jamming Troublemaker on 8 just makes a lot of sense anyway.
Yep. Kind of hard for the rogue to deal with, right? Not only the 2 3/3s, which are manageable, but just the 6/8 in itself body is a huge problem.
Yeah, so therefore picking up the Oasis Ally seems to make sense, because you're almost certainly going to have those minions to be attacked into on the following turn. And now RDU can pretty much just burn face turn after turn. I wouldn't be surprised if Bozzzton just goes, alright, fine, the rogue sweep is dead, let's move on.
Yeah, let's look at the next card, see what it is. It is rubbish. Next, says Bozzzton, and again, I'm with you, I understand. Couldn't really make a comeback from there, no field contact for far too long, and simply just nothing to do, right? The Kazakas, no Jandis, just nothing past basically that Mankrik really happened that game for Bozzzton, so not going to get the 3-0. But it is not over yet. RDU still has to get 2 more wins on the Mage, which, judging from his previous series, is doable, as he did just come off a sweep of Letter 3-0 with his Mage. But he is going to have to beat this Demon Hunter or the Bozzdton's Mage. Oh, sorry, Demon Hunter and Bozzdton's Mage to do so.
Yeah, it was a very one-sided beatdown from RDU there. Hard to think if there was anything Bozzzton could have done differently, which I don't really think there was. We talked a lot about, obviously, Neophyte on 2 just made perfect sense. From there was that one sort of slightly unusual turn where he just chose to push the extra damage, but I think that made sense against, you know, the range of options I was describing, and as I said, had the potential to push 3 more damage still. And even then, like, if he'd have just played Mankrik that turn, does that mean he wins that game against RDU's flow into the Pexis Blast on 4 into Deck of Lunacy hand? No, obviously not. That's nonsense. It was just too high a discrepancy between the quality of the 2 draws there, I think, and, you know, Bozzzton continues to have just done everything he can in the final, right? I am pretty impressed, to be honest, with how well he has adjusted from his semi-final to the final.
It looks like we're going to dive straight into a European specialist matchup here of Spell Mage Mirrors going in, as Bozzzton is going to lock in the mirror match as opposed to going for his Demon Hunter, which again, obviously RDU needs to win each game, but would you say the mirror is a better matchup than the Demon Hunter in Bozzdton's favor?
Tough to say. I like opinions on the Mage Demon Hunter matchup differ, because generally, obviously, you think that you can out-heal the Mage in a lot of positions, but it's very, very hard to do in certain spots. So opinions on that one kind of swing wildly back and forth. And then obviously the Mage Mirror is just a 50-50. Right. Maybe you can have some opinions on builds back and forth, but I think it's 2 close matchups overall. And really, this is kind of the reverse situation where normally we see in Conquest, like, Q order really doesn't matter that much. This is kind of that spot now in this is that spot now in Last Hero Standing where the Q order doesn't matter that much, because, you know, the series is going to resolve down fully one way or the other, right? So it's just kind of a choice as to which matchup you want to go with first. It used to be in the days of, like, closed deck lists that you could scout with your weaker matchup to get information about your opponent's deck for your stronger matchup, but in open deck lists it doesn't really matter too much.
I'll tell you something, I'm going to be seeing Incantus Flow in my dreams tonight, and I'm not sure whether they're going to be good ones or nightmares, because they're all over the show right now. Bozzzton having Flow into Flow. The only thing he is missing is card draw, because we have seen this opening from Bozzzton, not from him specifically, but this kind of opening actually lose this mirror match, right?
I'm just sitting back and watching the fireworks go off, Raven. I'm just sitting here watching facial expressions. Yep.
Already. Nice. Already, RDU just having the card draw makes me like naturally favor his position over double flow.
That was the one. That was the one I was waiting for, Raven. RDU thought he was the man with his one Incantus Flow, throwing out the emote, and then from the other side, Bozzzton throws out the Incantus Flow, gets the reaction out of RDU, but then it's the second one. That's when the facial reaction meta really comes into play.
If you need to respond, throwing 2 Phoenixes at your opponent's face is a pretty good plan, isn't it? Because that is going to be a ton of spell damage all at the same time.
RDU is just such good value.
And I do think there's a certain element as well where, because RDU is safe and Bozzzton is pretty much safe, that you understand what I mean, but RDU can take a slightly more light-hearted approach to this game.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? I don't want to say he doesn't care at all, that's not true, but it's just that this isn't soul-crushing if he loses, right? If he loses, he's still up there, it's still fine. So this just makes his responses a bit more understandable, I guess.
Yeah. But I do also think it's commendable that RDU still absolutely has that competitive drive.
Oh, of course. Yeah.
He's one of those like Hearthstone personalities who's in a position where, you know, he could just bow out of Grandmasters, right? You know, he could just do what Dog did and just choose to step down and focus on streaming. He could just not put the work in, like, you know, Tyler, for example, this season, and then just get relegated. But instead, he's competing in GM because he wants to, because he has that competitive drive. He doesn't need this in any way, shape, or form. He just likes competing and likes winning, and I think that's very commendable in his spot.
I mean, him and his teammate, right, Tice, exactly the same situation,
Absolutely.
right? They both, neither of them, you know, I guess financially would need to be here, but they both just want to compete. They want to win at Hearthstone, and it's pretty sick to watch. And as I mentioned, this card draw effect for RDU seems to be helping him out just that little bit more, as Bozzzton's hand is looking pretty stale.
It's just the play. It's so dumb, but there literally isn't a better play this turn than just Potion of Illusion, your 2 Phoenixes. I honestly would have bet so much money on the idea that RDU was going to rip the cram session off that Rune Orb, but it just didn't come to pass in the end.
And look at this hand from Bozzzton. He can stop these 2, but that's all he can do, right? Like, this is actually an incredibly bad hand that feels unfortunate is the word I'm going to use. Okay.
I mean, sure. There's only 3 cards in your hand that are green this turn, so I suggest you play them.
Can you even use that ping?
RDU has the best smirk.
Oh, okay.
Yep.
That's the card. Refreshing Spring Water for 3.
It does, yeah, still cost him a mana to ping, right?
Yep. Nothing else to really do otherwise. Does he want going into this turn just to play a minion here? I think so, right?
Guess so.
Going into turn 7, do you want to just get hit for 10, so then a fireball is just game? Counterspell for next turn with Mask of Cthulhu potential? Or with the Occult as well? Still, RDU could go for just Evolving Missiles, Brain Freeze if needed, and then Mask this turn.
Right.
Otherwise now, though, maybe Combustion Ring Toss is looking a little bit more favourable.
Yeah, Ring Toss honestly doesn't look that bad now. That's the draw. He has the ability to just line up Mask of Cthulhu into the spell damage turn if he really needs to here. So you can just drop the other spells, drop the Ring Toss, disrupt as much as possible. He gets his Phoenixes waking up next turn. He still has, much like Bozzzton, still has all of his card draw left stacked in his deck. This has been a weird Mage Mirror where everyone hit the nuts in terms of mana cheat early on, but then no one has found the card draw since then. Really, the only difference in position in this game is that RDU hit 2 Phoenixes and then Ruined Orb the face for 6. Right? That's the only thing that's different, really, as to why the Bozzzton is so heavily on the defensive.
Is that rigged?
I mean, I wouldn't mind taking a punt on rigged here because everything else seems relatively unimportant.
Rigged Netherwind Portal. It was.
Yep.
Makes sense. It looks so weird that so much of Bozzzton's hand is unplayable when it costs nothing. So bad.
What are those?
Bad. Is it Flurry just as a dumpable card? I think so.
I guess so, yeah. Hand does light up now as Netherwind Portal is activated.
Yay, I can play cards!
Yeah. Counterspell, Occult Conjurer, Brain Freeze. Default play that I'm seeing. Whether or not he can find something better here. He doesn't have the burn really to support Mask of Cthulhu. Like, he could think about just jamming Mask of Cthulhu, right? And then just trying to set up for a burn plan from there, but he just doesn't really have the burn in hand to support that anyway. He's already drawn 1 Spring Water in terms of having some kind of miracle lethal turn by dealing 10 damage here.
He's at least managed to get some minions on the board, and there is that counterspell live now. Unfortunately for Bozzzton, RDU just has a Evolving Missiles he can play if he wants.
That's still literally nothing, though. I feel like RDU's deck is 3 basic genres of card here. Burn damage to end the game, card draw to end the game, and then literally nothing is all the other cards. And that's what RDU has picked up with the Ring Toss.
At least Ring Toss will have some impact because he has the time, because his health is pretty decent.
Yep. But now, because RDU whiffed so hard on these last couple of turns, this is the swing turn that Bozzzton has been waiting for. This is the Mask of Cthulhu, now setting up a potential lethal on the other side. That is not good enough for RDU, and he might even have to consider fireballing the minion if he whiffs on Ice Barrier here, but no such thing. Ice Barrier first up, which means now he can ignore the minion, hold on to that fireball for lethal outs.
At this point, again, I can triple check. It was Counterspell, but I was wondering if RDU should have picked Netherwind. Purely because Bozzzton's had so many cards in his hand for so long, you'd imagine he's got something he can dump, right, to just bust a Counterspell open.
Yeah, you also don't cast the fire. Oh my god. You also don't cast the fireball here if you're RDU, because weirdly enough, there are worlds where you want to use the fireball to break counterspell on a following turn. If you were to draw like Arcane Intellect or Refreshing Spring Water or something like that, you would actually much rather draw 2 cards than have 1 fireball in your hand.
And if you draw lethal because of its flow and the cost of this fireball, there's no lethal you couldn't do anyway, right?
Exactly, yeah. Is it me, or has Bozzzton aged like 12 years since we started the stream?
Yeah, I think that's true. And to be fair to him this time, like, what is he supposed to do with this? It's just a mess. It's literally just the worst cards in his deck right now.
It really is, yeah. Bozzzton going to attack, and I respect it. 20% of the time RDU did not get offered Ice Barrier there, and then you're actually in a pretty good position for top deck lethal. And since you're dealing 7 damage anyway, big deal, right? If it ends up being the... if it ends up being the Ice Barrier, big deal. You get it activated anyway.
There's the Fireball. There's the Mask of Cthulhu. And there is the lethal and the smirk from Mr. RDU as he takes this series all the way to the last game. And that means it's going to be Mage versus Demon Hunter for the last game, not only of this series, Sottle, not only from this day, but of this week for the European Grandmasters, as it's going to decide who's going to bag those 5 points. And I didn't expect the series to go like this, especially after just leading 2-0 for Bozzzton.
Absolutely not. He looked extremely favoured, basically from winning that unfavourable on the get-go. Obviously, you will be extremely favoured in a series. If you get the bad side of an opening matchup and then win that unfavourable, you basically flip the dynamic right on its head and put yourself in an incredibly strong position. However, now having it come all the way back to 2-2, and now we have Mage versus Demon Hunter, which I don't think is a particularly blowout matchup from either side. However, from what we have seen so far with Bozzzton on Demon Hunter, and with Bozzzton's overall record in GM with Demon Hunter, which I believe is 2-8 now, which is a miserable win rate overall with OTK Demon Hunter, now I'm starting to fear for him a little bit, because this is one of the decks where he did really have some issues in the previous series, and clearly this is a deck that he's had a very poor win rate with over the course of the season, to the point where Lorinda even theorizing that he might be trying to hide the deck and not play it at this point, because he has confidence in it, which you do have the ability to do in Last Hero Standing, right? You do have the ability to just not run out a deck if it comes down to it. So this is it now. This is everything coming to the culmination. If you know, Bozzzton is going to vanquish those demons from earlier in the day, there is no better way to do that than with a Demon Hunter.
Yeah, all with the demons he's drawn himself. Yeah, it's a matchup I like, but it's one that Sigil of Flame will now be, I guess, punishing for him, because it's nowhere near as good against Mage as it is against some of the other decks, such as, say, Rush Warrior or that the Rogue, of course. So this is where I was praising the building earlier against certain matchups, but this might come back to bite him now. But like I said, it's both players, of course, do want to win, but Bozzzton is at least feeling relatively secure, in even if he ends up second place today, right? In a points scenario, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I think Bozzzton would have had a little bit more on the line here, just in terms of, you know, overall perception of him as a player, in terms of building confidence going into playoffs, and even just securing that last tiny percentage chance that he didn't meet his goals this season. Whereas for RDU, we've already talked about it. It's just a matter of drive, and it's just a matter of prize money for him at this point. And then final placings and that head-to-head race with Yala and Tice, I guess, as to who's going to finish potentially top of the standings. But yeah, a ton on the line here. And I mean, honestly, like, how many different ways are there to say RDU draws Incanter's Flow in his opening hand? Because I ran out like 4 weeks ago, and he just keeps doing it.
Okay, next season, if Spell Mage is a thing, I want it in a different language every time you say it. Deal?
Alright, I can do that.
Cool. Bozzzton's response, again, to the Incanter's Flow, and a nice little smirkaroo from Radu.
Yeah, honestly, Bozzzton's hand not looking that bad either. Particularly with that skull now picked up. Now he has the opportunity to go Illidari Studies into a free Spectral Sight on the following turn, or even actually right now if he wanted to do it.
Yeah, and also importantly to note, in this matchup, the Immolation Aura is much more dumpable, right? It's not like in Rogue where you feel bad if you just get it on 1 to 2 minions. Like, you can just throw this away whenever you've got the mana free against Mage, and you're going to be fine.
And this is one of those incredibly fun Demon Hunter hands to play, where basically every card is just going to get played in a procession from left to right in your hand, and nothing else is really going to be factored in apart from which cards you're going to hold on to. But Bozzzton going to greed out this Spectral Sight for an additional turn here, just deciding that, you know, there's nothing really that he would end up playing of this Spectral Sight if he plays it here, so he gives himself the opportunity to draw an Outcast card on the right-hand side of his hand instead.
Which he did do.
Which he did do. Yeah. So you just got to ditch all the left-hand side cards now.
RDU putting yet more faith in the Phoenix here as he gets one down nice and early. Does have Cram Session as well, and also has a way to get to that turn with Arcane Intellect next turn. So he is on course for drawing an absolute ton of cards this game so far.
It's got to be a weirdly melancholic feeling where you cast a Spectral Sight for 0 mana, but you had 2 4-mana skulls in your hand that just don't cost 4 mana anymore, right? I'm not really sure how you're supposed to feel about that.
You can't reduce the mana from the cards you draw from the reduced mana skull unless you play the reduced
exactly.
Spectral Sight.
Yeah.
Good metaphor for life.
Is it? Okay.
I don't know. I just felt like that was something I should say. I thought you were going to reply with yes, Raven, and then explain it to the audience. No?
Oh, I'm not here to make you sound deep and philosophical. What do you mean? It's not in my job description.
Need to send another letter to Blizzard. Can we edit Sottle's contract?
Demons.
Here. Is this one of those turns that the Immolation Aura could just be played? Just get it out the way?
It doesn't have to be, right? Because turn 5 is still in the way between now and the skull, so Bozzzton can choose to wait, use the Immolation Aura to clean up the Phoenix on the following turn, which I would think is probably fairly wise. However, this turn is a big old stack of nothing.
Yeah, I'm just thinking more of the hand space concerns. Because he could still Immolation Aura the Phoenix next turn because he has 2, of course, but he could just go with playing Crimson Sigil Runner and just saying that'll do for now.
Yeah, extremely weak turn, but it's tough because normally in a lot of matchups having 2 Moargs in hand right now, you'd be quite happy to just dump a Moarg out on board and just say, okay, I'm going to create some hand space, it's going to play it out, even though it's a minion that's very easily dealt with, it's still a minion, it can still fight for board a little bit. There's some matchups where it fights for board very effectively. However, against Mage, Moargs are really important because of how much extra healing they offer, and that's what the matchup really comes down to quite often, is you need to stall with Moarg I-Beam while you are drawing cards to get your own combo going, while the Mage tries to burn you out.
Now you also got some hand space issues pretty soon, since those fonts of power are close to unplayable at this point.
Yeah.
Could just Phoenix Brain Freeze this 1/1 away?
There must be a way.
Again, a bit of a throwaway use of Brain Freeze, but you've got to make the space somewhere.
Even more aggressively than you expected, throwing cards out of his hand, Raven.
Didn't really get anything mind-blowing either from the Font of Power, initially. Firebrand is a great card, but this is one of the matchups where you're not really expecting to get the strong use out of it.
Yeah.
Is that both Natural Moags and Il'gynoth at full cost?
No, that's a Philosophy Moarg.
Oh, he philosophied earlier, right? He had it really early on, didn't he? Yeah, sorry. Okay, not too bad then. Still, even though Bozzzton's had a good hand, I don't know. Like, does this Demon Hunter game feel slow to you? Or is it just me?
Demons?
It has been a little bit, yeah, because he used both discounts on that Spectral Sight, which obviously he needed to do, and we talked about, but you're quite used to seeing Skull already being cast as Demon Hunter if it's in the opening hand. And it's just been, because he's had so much Skull and so many combo pieces in the rest of his hand, it's not like he's been spending the intermediary turns playing like Warblades or playing Chaos Strike or even just, you know, playing Double Jump, right? And cycling a few cards. That's what normally makes the Demon Hunter games feel like they're going faster, because even the turns leading up to Skull, they're generally doing things and affecting the board. But Bozzzton's basically had nothing to do except dump cards from the left-hand side of his hand up until this point.
Well, even though Apexis Blast is quite tempting, I think this Corrupted Ring Toss just has to be played at this point.
Observe and reflect.
How do you really want to interrupt this turn 6?
Yep.
Apologies that we can't see the Discovers, of course. I will let you know as soon as I see what he has picked.
He took Counterspell off the first one, which was fairly straightforward. And then Netherwind, Rigged Fair, and Mirror is his second choice, which can only imagine, is going to be the Netherwind portal here. Rigged fair game, hand way too stacked up to be dealing with that. Mirror Entity, almost always a huge throw if you pick it against Demon Hunter because of the way that Moarg Artificer would work interacting with it. And in the end, yep, Counterspell and Netherwind portal were the two choices. RDU gives the nod, but yeah, I mean, what else are you going to do there as Bozzzton, right? Like, throw out an Immolation Aura, have no clearing power for the rest of the game. Like, he knows what he's doing there. He's just going to give up one skull to the Counterspell and then hope that the second skull is able to get him there.
Yeah, if you're ever going to just skull into Counterspell, and pretty obviously it's because you have a second one locked, loaded, and ready to go, right? So it is obviously not good for Bozzzton, but it's not the end of the world. Although the problem might be now that if he does skull and doesn't find something pretty impressive, he might just be dead.
He may indeed.
Slowly edging towards that point, right? And we can see the double 3-mana Fireball with the Phoenix on board.
Yeah. And crucially, even if he goes Skull here and picks up I-Beam for free, he still can't Moarg I-Beam, right? Unless he also picks up the remaining 0-mana Moarg in his deck.
And that's without even talking about, like, this is Netherwind, did you say, right?
Yes, it is.
So this is without even adding an additional random 4-drop to the board as well.
Yep. The alternative play is to do something with Blood Mage, Moarg, Fellscream Blast this turn to try and clear some board, restore some health. And then at that point, go back to the Skull on the following turn.
Could he ever do something like that, but with Immolation Aura instead? Just to save the Fellscream?
He could, yeah.
So he might still feel safe on 21 if he can clear the board, right?
He might, yeah, that's the big question. But he could also end up going both sometimes, because this way he gets to see the Netherwind portal first, right? And then go for the big heal with the Fellscream Blast. And I think this has to be the play, yeah. Like, I totally get what you're saying with the, you know, he's at 21, but the problem is if he chooses not to heal there, and then RDU just plays, like, Mask, right, from an empty board.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, Bozzzton goes, like, well, I still can't skull, right, because now I'm just dead to or whatever, you know. It just
now I'm just dead, but in a different way.
Exactly, yeah. So I think that is the smart choice from Bozzzton, but either way, it's not really leaving him in a very good-looking position overall.
Oh, Starscry not too bad at all, and RDU is slowly collecting the arsenal here of just insane amount of damage. Double Fireball and Ruined Orb in hand.
Yep.
With 0 skulls drawn yet, I believe. Skulls. Masks. Things that the masks go on. Wait, I'm confused.
Draw 10 cards, discount them by 3, and then shoot them individually at your opponent's face.
And I'd love it though if I didn't care what the cards were, it was just pieces of paper being thrown at your opponent's face.
Yeah. Mask of Gul'dan.
That's a, I don't know, 2026 expansion where you can literally merge cards.
Okay, serious business is approaching, Raven, because that is an extremely good skull to have hit here.
I grow impatient.
But is it lethal?
The Eye is free next turn. The Eye Beam is free. When it comes out of Eye Outcast position, it will end up being free, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it goes up to 5, 10, 20. So with the 2 swings of the Warblades going in as well, yes, it is. But that does mean then he has to attack face this turn. Don't hate. He's also considering whether or not he needs the 1 damage from the hero power and the 1 healing from the hero power, or whether he can play Spectral Sight for another card instead, which can change the dynamic. Chooses to take the card, goes up to 28, and now there is 9 in play plus 2 fireballs for RDU.
And the Ruined Orb.
21, 23 with the Ruined Orb, yeah.
Yeah, most importantly, the face attack, I think, there was even easy to decide because there's no spell damage minions on board, right?
Right.
So you're not afraid of spell damage stacking on spells. So that damage was the damage he'll take in 1 turn anyway, whether he trades or not. And then if he wins the turn after, who cares?
Yes. If the game lasts exactly 1 turn, then attacking face is just the only logical choice.
Ooh, and he actually can't proc this ring toss, can he? Or corrupt this ring toss, sorry.
No, you're right. Not and play it in the same.
Yeah, not and play it, apologies.
Yeah.
Because that would be a great response, wouldn't it? Of like, okay, this is looking a bit dicey. Ring toss to buy one more turn and then go again.
Yeah.
Looks like he might have to just play it the old-fashioned way.
Does get the counterspell, which is a huge deal because that is currently what Bozzzton's hand does not deal with. It's not it. It's not a spell. That's not it either. Now we might be in the spot where Bozzzton has to do the very stupid looking thing of playing out all his cards and just seeing whether or not he wins the game. So I don't think he has the luxury of doing anything else.
Yeah, that's it. So, okay, let's say it's counterspell. He can hero power, go face. That only puts him to 16, which you can't really expect to live when there's that much damage still on board.
Yep.
So yeah, he just has to go for it, and then this is going to be shut down. But this is the correct decision if you're in Bozzzton's seat right now.
I completely agree. He just absolutely has to go for it and just hope that it's not counterspell. Yeah, we've seen some wonky stuff from Bozzzton today, but that is not one of those moments. I think he absolutely makes the right decision in the end. RDU gives out the big old cheesy grin, and he is going to be our weekly champion. $3,000 richer, 5 points better off, and now he is really staking a claim for finishing in first place in regular season, which of course, that will not be the first time he manages to do that after having an extraordinary season, extraordinary regular season at least last year.
And it's something that, when we start to look at standings in a minute or so, it's something interesting to point out that this season, at least, seems like we just have all of the veterans doing the best, right? There's Yala, Tice, RDU, Bozzzton's been in Grandmasters since season 1, are all looking good near the top of the standings, at least in the European region. It's just something I thought about then.
Yeah, you see the way this game developed in the end. Bozzzton's hand started off looking fantastic, but it was just those auxiliary cards that filled in the gaps that were missing. No Chaos Strikes, no Eldrazi Warblades early, none of these nice easy tools, no double jump to really fill in those turns. He ended up having to float quite a lot of mana as he was setting up that Skull. And then all that hard work that he worked to set up with Skull of Gul'dan on 6 was shut down by the ring toss from RDU. That meant Bozzzton was one whole Skull down at that point. He then had to divert again because there was too much pressure on board. So, that Skull that he worked so hard to set up ended up being a whole 2 turns delayed from the turn where he ended up wanting to play it. And by that point, he was just running out of time. But again, not